are back. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, cats and dogs, for another Real Talk session with me, Energy. Tonight, I am joined by the legendary producer, songwriter, doer of all things, all the way from Nashville, Tennessee. I don't even know how to do a Western accent, Southern accent. Fett, how are you? And I'm just going to call you Fett Nashville because you're Fett from Nashville. I don't know what your last name is.
If you did, I'd have to shoot you, and you know we don't want to get things to get messy here. So yeah, just Fett. That's the whole thing.
That's it. I mean, I love it because that's me as well. Like Emma G. What does the G stand for? Nobody knows.
And nobody can pronounce it, even if they did. So
how are you? What's going on?
I'm very good, actually. Life is a little wacky in general right now for everyone, but I'm doing just fine.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like you and your wife Nancy are thriving during this really bizarre, chaotic time. You both are running an organization called Azalea Music and empowering women through audio. And there's so many things that I love about what you do. I was so thrilled to meet you at the Taxi rally a couple of years ago in Los Angeles. I'd been following you for a while, and then I was like, oh my God, I get to meet you in real time. And it was so good. How did you, who are you? What got you started in what you do?
Well, the short version is I'm a producer engineer by trade.
Right.
I've always had the producer bug, literally since I was single digits old, single digit years old, messing around with reel-to-reel tape recorders when I was a little kid. I mean, I've always had that engineer producer thing. But I started out like most people as a musician, learning all the songs I liked, and then started to write my own songs, and then realized rather quickly that I like to record songs. And then I realized really quickly after that, I much prefer recording everyone else's songs, not mine.
I love it.
And that was 30 plus, closer to 40 years ago now. And that's kind of how I got to this point. I've branched out into a lot of things that are related to what I do in recent years. I have a ton of online courses that have to do with production, engineering, recording, that kind of thing. I'm the host, the creator, and the host of empoweringwomeninaudio.com. I saw a niche about 4 years ago that just was not being served. It was the weirdest thing. So I do a lot of work with women in audio, including live clinics here in Nashville. Well, not at the moment, but usually 2 live clinics a year. Let's see what else. That's it in a nutshell, basically.
That's so, I mean, okay, so how did you, I'm so fascinated by the fact that you have gone from, producing by yourself for other people, but to now empowering women. There are so many, because as we all know, the music industry is so dominated by middle-aged white men, generally speaking.
Absolutely. Yep.
And using a niche there is obviously, it's obviously admirable in a lot of ways. But then you decided to actually cater for so many women who do work in the industry. What made you come to that decision? How do you feel being that middle-aged white man, catering for that?
Well, it's interesting. It came from my clients. I guess about 15 years ago, I started working with some female clients, which was very rare for people who wanted to learn about recording, mixing, and mastering back in those days.
Right. It was only like 5 years ago, right? Just to clarify, because you're not that old, so it was only like 5 years ago, right?
Yeah. You called me middle-aged. That was very generous of you, actually.
You're like 35.
I'm in my 60s now, so I'll take middle-aged any day. So.
Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm just gonna be quiet over
Nancy Moran, my wife, might say I don't act in my 60s, but 60 months maybe. But anyway, it was my client base that starting about 15 years ago, but particularly over the last, let's say 8 or 10 years, more and more of my clients, my consulting clients, my students in my courses, people who attended my classes at things like the Taxi Road Rally and stuff, and my recording clients, a larger and larger percentage of them were women. And I was kind of fascinated knowing that the statistic that, you know, people have thrown around for 20 some years in the music industry is that approximately 5% of the jobs in pro audio, as it's called, which is both live and studio engineering, are filled by women. And I thought that was kind of ridiculous. So I started to notice my client base was definitely shifting a much, much greater percentage of women. Like I was getting 50-50 in my classes between men and women. So that was really encouraging. But the other thing is, having worked with a lot of women in the studio, and particularly women engineers, like Kim Person, who is the producer, engineer for a lot of Tommy Emmanuel's albums, I'd started to notice that the approach that women took to music and to engineering and to producing was very different from men. And women bring a lot of strengths. Part of it's cultural, part of it's physiological, but they bring a different set of skills, perspectives to the whole process than men do. I learned, for example, in researching that women have a different range of hearing than men do. Particularly in the higher frequencies. So if you and I got in front of a mix in front of the same set of speakers in the same room, you would literally hear that mix differently than I do. And this
that is
stuff
fascinating.
just wasn't really being addressed all that much. And so the short version of the story, as I said to Nancy 4 years ago, this is either the stupidest idea I've ever had or a really important one, but I want to start teaching clinics to women, specifically to women. And the reason they're women-only clinics in terms of the attendees has nothing to do with politics or anything like that. It's about taking out the gender factor from the learning experience. So it's all women who show up, all women who study, all women who work together, all women who build a community around that week-long seminar. And it's a different dynamic than if it was a mixed gender audience. It just is. I've seen it happen over and over and over again. So we just take that out of the dynamic. It's a safe, supportive environment for women to come and focus entirely on being peers of recording, engineering, producing, and all that kind of stuff. And it's been unbelievably rewarding and life-changing for me. It is 1,000 times more what I expected I would ever get out of it. And yeah, I'm the guy in the room, which is, you know, I kind of have to address that on day 1 out of 5. But that goes away really quickly. I'm one of the girls as far as the seminar is concerned, and I'm just there to be a facilitator. And what's fascinating is, you know, the first day I'm the teacher, I kind of start the process, but by day 5, I've melded back into the, you know, the background pretty much. Because they have come out of their shells and they have taken over and they are asserting themselves and realizing that, damn, I have a lot of abilities and skills I didn't know I had, and I can exercise them now. So it's awesome. A fabulous experience for me to go through. And we've done 8 clinics now, I think, 6 clinics, something like that. So
that's cool.
And every time it's just as good.
That's awesome. Do you do most of your, like, because you're based in Nashville, so obviously your clientele is predominantly Nashville based, but do you travel much around the country beyond the taxi rally?
Well, it's funny. Nancy, again, Nancy Moran, my wife, my business partner as well. She and I talk at a lot of conferences and things like that. We do the BTW Madison conference in the late spring, early summer. We do the Taxi Road Rally. We did lots and lots of events for the Nashville Songwriters Association for quite a few years here. But as far as our clientele goes, the really interesting thing is most of my clients are not in Nashville. And a huge percentage of them are not in the United States. I was raised abroad. I didn't grow up here. So I kind of have an international background anyway. But and this is one of the things I'd love to talk about tonight. What we found is we tend to have a very country-centric view of our own music business wherever we happen to live. If you live in the UK, you kind of see it as the UK's music industry. If my good friend Nick Harvey, who lives down in Melbourne, Australia, you know, people in Australia tend to see it as an Australian music industry. And we do it here in the US. And, you know, even within the city that you're in, if you happen to live in Chicago, you know, you see the music industry and your music life in terms of Chicago. And we have never, ever relied on Nashville to fill our client roster. What we do get from Nashville is a phenomenal infrastructure of the music industry and stupidly good talent. So when somebody comes to Nashville to record an album with me, or I'm doing remote mixing and mastering and overdubbing of parts and, you know, production for them, they're getting the cream of the cream of the cream of the crop. So even though we are not Nashville centric in our clients, we are definitely Nashville based in terms of the resources we use. And I'm the first to admit I am totally spoiled rotten and absolutely in awe of this town. After 27 years of living here, I'm just blown away by the level of quality, thinking, perspective, and everything living in a music industry town. There is nothing like it. I mean, I lived in the DC Baltimore area, as you know, for 16 years before I moved here. And, you know, that's like 6-7 million people living up there. And I thought, man, they got a pretty big scene going on. No. Not compared to Nashville. It's just a completely different planet when you come to Toontown here.
No, I totally agree.
So this is a good message for people, though. If you live somewhere, you don't need to think of that place being the entirety of your music career, your music life, your clients, your music existence, particularly with the internet. You literally, the world is at your fingertips. You know, if you've got a phone or a computer or a tablet, you literally have the world at your fingertips, and everyone anywhere can be a client. You know, about the only time you absolutely have to have the client with you physically is if they are recording their parts, and even that we can talk about isn't totally necessary anymore. So I kind of got off on a little bit of a tangent, but yeah,
I love it.
Nashville plays a huge part in everything we've learned and everything we do, but our clients are literally everywhere around the world.
Yeah. No, I've been to Nashville, I think twice now, and I've always been like kind of, I flirt with Nashville a lot, but it was the hot chicken that kind of scared me away. I'm not gonna.
I love hot food, so spicy works for me.
No, so you wanted to talk about I mean, let's just go straight for it. I wanted to, when we first sort of started chatting, I wanted to talk about like how coronavirus is affecting your work, but obviously because you're working with such a diverse range of humans from around the world, that hasn't really been much of an issue for you as much as it has for other people in the industry. But you know, one of the things that you mentioned, you know, before we went live was talking about how, and Nashville is a great indication of this, is how people are really having to dig deep into themselves, into their creative skill sets, and into their library of knowledge, if you will, to figure out how to pivot due to everything that's going on right now. And you're a great example of that with all of your skill sets. How do you sort of work around that? How do you encourage other people to work around that?
Well, first of all, as far as our situation goes, we're still able to keep going, being based here in Nashville and having clients around the world and what have you. Nancy does a lot of artist development coaching. I do a lot of consulting. And of course, we've got wonderful things like Zoom and what have you to do that with. Our online courses obviously are still there and still accessible and still being taken by people. But even things like remote mixing and mastering, I still do sessions here at the studio. I'm at the studio now.
All right.
2 weeks ago, we had a socially distanced session. So we're fortunate enough that we have a lot of rooms here at the studio. So we've got the drum room over here. We've got the guitar room over there. We could put the bass player over here by the vocal booth. I can be over here at the console in the control room. So everybody was spaced apart in separate rooms. Everybody wore a mask, and we were still able to work. So even in the midst of everything going on, we're still able to do the functions that we're used to doing. Now, one of the members of the Brecking crew, the Brentwood Wrecking Crew, who's our house band, if you will, has a history of illnesses that makes him more susceptible, and he's high risk. So he overdubs his keyboard parts. And, you know, so I get on Zoom with him and we go over the notes and the charts, you know, Nashville number charts. I think I got a few of them laying around here. And he lays down his parts and sends me the files and what have you. With software nowadays, you can even do that in real time if you want to. But we've managed to keep the studio functioning in that way, even though we're not a bunch of folks in a room real close together, staring each other in the eye like we were before. But that gets back to your point about being able to pivot and adapt. I mean, we just, we realized that we have to do some things a little bit differently. But the question I'm always asking myself about any situation that comes up, but it's been ringing in my ears over and over and over again the last 4 or 5 months is, do you want to be a part of the problem or do you want to be a part of the solution? And if you want to be part of the solution, you've got to adjust. And that means being considerate of other people, playing your part for the community, the greater good and all that kind of stuff, and still continuing to do what it is you do. And to your other point about what it is you do, I'm fascinated by creative people, musicians, artists, poets, whatever the case may be. We all have these certain traits about us, like we're all really hard on ourselves. We're always our own worst critic. We tend to get emotional and panic before everybody else does. But at the same time, we're phenomenally resilient and phenomenally flexible.
Yeah.
And even a lot of people think, well, I really don't do anything well except sing or write songs or play guitar or, record other people or whatever the case may be. And then you start asking them about their life and what they've done. And they list all these different day jobs they've had and different careers they've had and different bands they've played with and different styles over the years. And you're like, I hate to tell you this, but listen to yourself talk. You're phenomenally flexible and able to change in the moment, depending on where the income is coming from or what opportunities happen to arise. This is no different. It might mean we need to stretch our brains a little bit more than we're used to. But to me, despite all of the horrific stuff that's happening, let's not pretend that it isn't. It is also the absolute opportunity of a lifetime for every individual on the planet.
Word.
Including musicians and creatives and people like that. And let me give you one example of something that a lot of music people or creatives can do that they don't necessarily describe themselves as, and that's teacher. I got into teaching kind of as a accidental offshoot of doing what I do and no one being able to shut me up. I like to talk about what I do. But the motto I've always had for my clients who want to learn about putting on live clinics or online courses and stuff is, you got to remember, you always know more than someone else. So even if you've been playing guitar for a year, or you've only had your home studio for 6 months, or you've only been producing videos online for 3 months, you already know stuff that other people don't because they're not at that point yet.
Right.
And you can teach that to other people. You can do it for free through short YouTube videos, instructional stuff, kind of how to and what have you. Or you can take the next step and start shooting some static videos, that play back. They're not live, that take people through steps of how to do those things. And then you can expand that into teaching courses. And what's great, getting back to the whole thing about the internet nowadays, is everything you need to do it. I mean, absolutely every tool is at your disposal right now. Most of it is free, which just blows me away. If it's not free, it's ridiculously cheap. If you want to do videos, you need your phone and a computer, seriously, or not even a computer anymore. You can edit on this thing and post it to the net, seriously.
No, I'm laughing because I'm like, real talk.
But same thing with recording studios. I mean, for under $1,000, you can have a phenomenal studio nowadays. I don't mean just a great, okay studio. I mean a phenomenal studio for under $1,000 if you're willing to look and talk to somebody who's done it before. So there's all these opportunities, teaching just being one of them, that every one of us has at our disposal. We just have to put on our creative thinking cap as a creative person and go, oh, I've been here before. I didn't think I've been here before, but I've been in situations like this on a smaller scale. I just need to do what I always do. Yeah. It's like when somebody asks you to play at a gig and you don't know all the songs. So what do? You woodshed and you learn the songs before you get to the gig, or you put up some charts or whatever you need to do to get the job done. We're just used to doing that. and there's of course the old adage, Cheryl Wheeler, the great songwriter and guitarist and performer, talks about how when Jonathan Edwards asked her to play bass for his band, she said, "Yes, sure." And then she goes, "Oh, I've never played bass before." But she learned how to play bass, and she played bass for Jonathan Edwards. I mean, this is what we do. This is what we do as musicians, and this is no different in that regard. I could go on about that one all day, but hopefully
no, I love it. I love it. I love it. So before we get into the nitty gritty, I have two random questions for you, because you talked about like having having a diverse range of skill sets from different jobs and things. What is the weirdest job that you've ever had?
The weirdest job, music related or not?
Anything. Like my most random job was working at a hardware store as your friendly, like know-it-all person about building supplies.
Okay. I think the weirdest job I ever had was digging ditches to build swimming pools in Saudi Arabia during the summers while I was at university. I would say that's probably the most untypical job that I know among anyone personally, but probably most people have never dug ditches in Saudi Arabia for a living over the summer. So.
That is definitely not what I was expecting. I love it. I love it. And my next question was, what is it like living and being married to and owning a company with working alongside your wife?
Well, for us, it's a blessing. And having known many couples in the music industry who are no longer couples, I can't say that's universally true, but Nancy and I are very fortunate in that we have completely complementary skills. And to some degrees, personalities, in that all the stuff that she's interested or does well or what have you, I'm not really interested in or do well, and vice versa. So her primary focus is writing songs and performing and coaching and that kind of thing. My primary focus is recording and producing and engineering and consulting people about that type of thing. So we kind of meet in the middle. If she's got a song that she's finished, I can look at it from a production viewpoint and help her get it recorded. But when she needs to come to me and I need something to do, she's, interestingly enough, for someone who is a creative, she also is one of the rare people who's fortunate enough to have a lot of left brain available to her when she needs it. She doesn't like it, but if there's something funky with some software on the internet, Nancy's the person I go to. She's our IT department here at Azalea Music. Again, she doesn't like to do that stuff, but she's very capable of doing it. So we have all these different things that we're into. And so we sort of fill out the whole array of stuff that needs to get done. We also kind of joke about the fact that we have pretty much since about 1988 spent every waking hour together. We even had the same day job at one point, and we would, we'd leave the house in the morning in the same car, work on the same project at the same company in the same office all day, eat lunch there. Yeah, I know there's a lot of people out there cringing, like, I could never do that with my spouse. Then we'd come home, we'd change our clothes, load up all our gear into the car, drive down to downtown DC or wherever the gig was, play a gig for a few hours, wrap up everything, put it back in the car, drive home, grab dinner in there somewhere, go to bed and get up the next day and do it all over again. And that was our life for many years. Now neither of us has a day job, and we both work in music full time, but her office is upstairs, mine's downstairs, and we meet in the middle, and we hang out with each other all the time. We used to tour quite a bit. We played for years and years in the folk market, and we would get in the car and we'd bring a pile of like 15 CDs with us. And the goal was to listen to those CDs in the car to pass the time of the trip. Well, we'd go 3, 4, 10 days and never listen to a single CD. Because we get in the car and off we go. We just never ever ran out of anything to talk about. And every time we get home from a trip, we just crack up. It's like, well, we brought them symbolically, but we didn't listen to any of them. So
I
So it
love it.
doesn't work for
I love it.
everybody, but we got lucky. Let's just
I
say
love it.
that it's
That's
still that way
beautiful.
after we've been married 30 years now. So it's
Yeah.
still
No,
that way for us. And
I saw the announcement on Facebook. I was like, yes, love exists. This is exciting.
well, my mom gave me the best piece of advice. I can't remember if I was in high school or college. I think it was in high school. And it was one of those really serious moments. And my mom was always the big supporter of my music, my whole life. And she said, the one thing you have to do is find somebody who appreciates the significance of music in your life. And if you don't, it ain't gonna work.
Mm.
And so I got that advice, fortunately, years before I met Nancy. And well, guess what? I found exactly what she was talking about. So
That's beautiful.
I could go on about that all night long. But yes, we work very well together. To the 10-second version of answering your question.
No, I love it. I love it. Okay, so moving into the more serious stuff. As we know, like the world's going through a pandemic at the moment, and myself being an artivist, living in DC is full of artivists. I'm sure Nashville also is filled with artivists. And for anybody who's watching who doesn't know what an artivist is, it's an artistic activist, which I think is a really as you put it, today at the moment, it's a beautifully crazy, tumultuous time to be in the creative industries, but also to be a musician. And you have quite a unique perspective on what's going on in the States at the moment. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah. This came to me kind of late in the process, but I was raised in Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. So I spent the bulk of my childhood in the Middle East, and I went to high school in Beirut, the capital of Lebanon, during the civil war there, which was not a good time. It was, we were there right in the thick of it all, and saw lots and lots of really awful things happen. But when things started to get really serious with the pandemic and with lockdown and everything else, I, for the first time in probably a couple decades, started to have these flashbacks to my life in Beirut during the war. And what I realized was, ironically enough, that time and all the awful shit that happened back then was perfect training for something like what's happening now. And what I mean by that is, we lived under martial law in Beirut. That's the lockdown part. We were used to shortages. There were times in Beirut where there were just certain stuff you couldn't get. Sometimes it was electricity and gas and, things like that. The whole idea of not being able to go out. I remember I used to call the cab company in the morning before school. And if the cab company was not willing to come to my neighborhood, I knew I wasn't going to school that day.
Right.
And sometimes that would go on for long periods, depending on what part of Beirut you lived in. Some people were locked down for weeks while, all holy hell was breaking loose. And so there were all these things going on back then that I had no idea would equip me for later in life. And so when things got serious and everything closed, basically, I was like, I've been here before. I know how this works. There are no guns involved, fortunately. No one's bombing my neighborhood. No one's trying to shoot me or anything. But as far as the ramifications of all that, the reason for it may be different, but a lot of the ramifications are the same. So the idea of going outside being a life and death thing, that's how it was in Beirut. If you turned the wrong corner or the wrong neighborhood at the wrong time, you could get your head blown off. Fortunately, it's not that immediate here. I mean, if you're just careful and use common sense, you're not going to lose your life. But that whole psychology, which people learn when they're in, a traumatic environment like that, stays in their heads. And the other conclusion that I came to was I couldn't stand on one level why some people were just freaking out. Like literally this was the end of the world. We were all going to die. Nothing would ever get better. And they just shut down and freaked out. There was another extreme of people who just pretended like nothing's going on and went on about business as usual and just we're all just like nothing's happening. And I couldn't wrap my head around why that was going on. And, each country around the world is handling it in their own way to varying levels of success. But in America in particular, I was having trouble wrapping my head around those two extremes. And I realized something. Most people in America, not through their own doing or their own fault, have never even experienced inconvenience, much less disruption, and certainly not trauma. I mean, of the however many thousand people that personally, indirectly, well or not, there might be a few who've been through truly extreme trauma in their life, and a few more who've had truly major disruption in their life. But most of them, lucky for us, because we're all spoiled shitless, we have to deal with inconvenience. They call this first world problems that we talk about. Oh, my internet is slow today, or they're out of, my shampoo at the grocery store. I mean, this is the sort of problem that most of America is used to dealing with, right?
Right.
And so that's when the light bulb went on for me. It's like, oh, I lived through that crap overseas, and I realized that's how 90% of the world lives most of the time, whether it's Ebola in Africa or war in Syria or whatever the case may be. That's what a huge percentage of the world is used to dealing with at some point in their life. But we're not. We are so insulated, isolated, and that's not to say we don't have problems. We have serious problems that we're trying desperately to address as a culture. But on the average, your normal person living in America just has never ever had to deal with anything like this. And so the result is most people don't have the skills. They've never been taught, well, what are you going to do if you're locked in your house for 6 months? I mean, it just never came up in conversation. So everyone is trying to make their own way from scratch. They may or may not have certain skills in terms of their upbringing or their perspective on life or their religion or spirituality, whatever you want to call it, how woo-woo they happen to be, that may help them as tools to deal with it, but they've never had to deal with it. I mean, literally every person on the planet who is alive right now has never experienced anything of this magnitude. The World War I and the pandemic of 1918 happened. Even if you were alive then, you'd have to be at least 102 now to even have been alive, much less old enough to remember it. And the closest thing that we've had to it with people who are still alive on the planet is the Great Depression and World War II. But even during World War II and the Great Depression, there were entire swaths of the world who were literally oblivious to the fact that any of it was happening. That's not the case now. Every single individual in every city in every country is affected by it. And so it has given me a certain ability to let go and maybe not be quite so judgmental of people when they're having a little trouble figuring it out. It's all new for virtually everyone in the States. And that's the one difference that I think I was able to develop a perspective on, because I can compare it to something not so great that I had lived through overseas, as a kid.
That's fascinating.
So that's why I have a unique perspective on this thing. But the plus of all this, the other part of my perspective that this gives me is, the Lebanese Civil War didn't last forever. Neither did World War II. Neither did the Great Depression. Neither did the Ebola outbreak in Africa. Every natural disaster that happens with earthquakes and tornadoes and everything else, they don't last forever. And we have to constantly remind ourselves that, when we're at the absolute darkest times, it's temporary. Now, temporary may mean 6 minutes or 6 months, I realize, but it's still temporary. And we have to take the approach of, what are we going to do after this? Or how are we going to get to after this? Not, oh my God, everything is ending, life sucks, and I give up, which is, how some people are trying to deal with it right now, but understandably.
No, I totally, I hear you on so many levels. I mean, coming from New Zealand, which is, again, a very privileged country in many ways, but spending half my life and isolated,
Mm-hmm.
but then spending half my life in Fiji with my father
Mm-hmm.
and his family, and then having shows like Survivor, which kind of trivialized the
Yeah.
way that I was raised. I'm like, motherfuckers, like,
Yeah.
what are you talking
Really?
about? What's so bad about having an outdoor loo? Like,
Yeah. Right.
whatever. But it's really down to perspective, and I had no idea that you were raised in Saudi Arabia. That totally makes sense now why you were so enamored by my last name being from Iran. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
there we go. So talking about like what's after this a little bit, but I guess before, I mean, I want to talk about how we're going to move into after this, but before we get to that, I also want to talk a little bit about, you know, because we're at home at the moment, so alone, so frustrated, so forced to look at ourselves nakedly in the mirror and be like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, this is what my own company looks like.
Mm-hmm.
This is what this is what my wife's company looks like, or my husband's
Yep.
company looks like. And, you know, being confronted by so much raw and real at the moment. I think that was a huge contributing factor to the political outbreak, human rights outbreak that we've had recently with the
Mm-hmm.
Black Lives Matter movement.
Mm-hmm.
How are you sort of coping with that? How are you feeling that artists are coping with that, moving through this not weird, much needed, much necessary time of waking the fuck up as a
Mm-hmm.
country, as a people, and recognizing the importance of equality? Like, how are you navigating that?
Well, there's a whole lot here. That again, I'm
Let's go.
relying on a lot of my tools that I inadvertently picked up as a kid growing up an expat abroad. But
Right.
um, I think that the key that we all need to learn is empathy. And we don't learn empathy by avoiding the people who are different from us or
Right.
even have different opinions. Um, I have this sort of approach. Well, I'm trying to think of what order to put this in. I'll tell you what I did, and that'll kind of illustrate what's going on.
Sure.
When the whole George Floyd thing happened, anyone who sees the video of that happening and is not utterly appalled needs to take a serious look in the mirror. Regardless of everything else that followed and how it got manifested and everything else, that was the spark. That was the you know, the overflowing of the water, the last straw, that, you know, whatever, that finally broke it out into the collective consciousness of the entire nation and the world, for that matter, in a way that had never happened before. So what I did at the time was, you know, here I am, this middle-aged white guy living in, you know, cushy Brentwood, Tennessee. You know, I don't have a ton of friends of color, but I do have friends of color. And I just started contacting all of my friends of color and say, look, first of all, as a middle-aged white guy, I want to apologize for the George Floyds and all of the other people like him who are unnamed. I want you to know that that's not how I feel or what I believe or anything I would ever do. But I want to start a dialogue. And the reason I did that was part of the way I learned to cope with things like the war in Lebanon and other overwhelming things, whether it's politics or social issues or whatever, is I have this thing I call my sphere of influence philosophy. I can't right now change what's happening in Iran, for example. I
Right.
can't right now affect the election that's happening in November. I can't right now cure somebody from cancer or whatever the case may be in and of myself. But what I can do is operate in my sphere of influence with other people I either know personally or have an interaction with. And this is one of the great things about social media and the internet again. And I'm just shy of my 2000th friend on Facebook. And I have to remember that I don't know every one of those people face to face. I haven't met them all face to face, but there's 2,000 people that what I say and do might be affected by.
Right.
And so that's why I reached out to my friends of color and I said, you know, I want to have a dialogue with you. and probably going to get a little emotional here, but probably one of the most profound conversations I had with one of my dear friends was about the conversation that he had to have with his kids about when you get stopped by a cop. And he's like, this is where you put your hands. This is where you don't put your hands. This is what you do say, what you don't say. Yes, sir. No, sir. All this other stuff that he's having to tell his children they have to be aware of every time they're stopped by a cop in America. And I had this really weird, like emotional thing come over me. And I realized I totally understand that. And I understood why. When I lived in Beirut, you know, every different neighborhood area of the city was controlled by a different militia. And it changed from hour to hour sometimes. And so when you came up to a roadblock in Beirut during the Civil War, you had no idea what side these folks were on. They could be the Phalangists, they could be the Morabitoun, they could be the Syrians, they could be the Palestinians, they could be the Israelis. You had no idea who it was or what side they were on. And so there was this moment of internal curling up inside that took place as you pulled up to the roadblock, and you know they asked for your whatagug, you know, give me your papers, and depending on who they happen to be, you may or may not make it out. It was that simple. And so one night, my sister was coming home from her boyfriend's house, having had dinner there. They were driving through his neighborhood in Beirut. And they came up to a roadblock, which was, you know, these flying roadblocks were everywhere. They popped up all the time. And they slowed down at the roadblock, and the people at the roadblock looked inside the car, asked for their papers, asked a couple questions, and then yalla go, wave them ahead. And as soon as they passed through the roadblock, they opened fire on the car. And he got it through the head. She got it in the back. By some impossible miracle, they both survived. He had the wherewithal to drive straight to the hospital and, drive extremely fast to get out of there and get them both to the hospital while, blood's gushing out of his head. But 97 bullet holes in the car later, they both survived. And I remember my sister describing this process to me, and I thought, that's it. That is what, here I go. That's what Black people feel in America right now. They could come up to, be pulled over by a cop, come up in a corner, whatever, and for no reason of their own, simply because they didn't look right, their life is over. And that was I had no idea this was going to happen.
You're okay.
That was a phenomenally powerful moment for me to realize that I, as a middle-aged white guy in America, could connect with a person of color in America and truly, truly empathize with how they feel. And I thought, it wasn't right in Beirut in 1975, and it isn't right now. It's just not right. And I think that kind of dialogue, that kind of discussion needs to take place across the country at every group, every level, every economic stratum, in every aspect of our society right now. Because people just, the thing I think I would summarize about this is people just don't understand each other.
Yeah.
And the only way you're going to do that is you got to reach out and make the effort. I mean, it isn't going to just, you're not going to watch a TV show and suddenly understand an entire group of people. It just doesn't work that way. Now, I was lucky in quotes to have lived through all that in Beirut and had a family member who, almost lost her life to make me understand this whole terror that Black people feel, people of color feel in America. Well, not everybody has that perspective, fortunately for them, but we have to find what comes from that perspective. We have to reach down in whatever part of ourselves, whether it's our religion that tells us or just our parents telling us what good and bad were, whatever. We have to reach down in that part of ourselves and reach out and understand how other people feel and why. And getting back to our main topic of conversation here, nobody can do that better than musicians and creatives. I mean, we have all the tools to observe, capture, and communicate all of that to a mass audience. I mean, if you're an accountant working in an office, you know, you don't have a lot of opportunity to go out and tell other people the story, you know. But if you're a musician who's got a, you know, a Facebook account, a YouTube channel, you're on Spotify, whatever the case may be, you can be part of the conduit to make that whole process happen in our culture. That is very powerful.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to shut up now and regain my composure and get some water here. I had no idea we were going here, but why not?
I really appreciate your story. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for, you know, for allowing me to hear that. I had no idea that you'd been through that, and it's inspiring in a lot of ways for me, as I explained, you know, being a person of color in America, but only having been in America for the last 5.5 years, I'm still learning about what it means to be a person of color. And I don't have the historical context of what it means to grow up in fear. And I think that puts you in a beautiful position, because not only, and you know, you'll see from some of my social media and conversations with the musicians collective that I manage, the Capital Groove Collective, I refer to, you know, white people, I guess, as lighter and brighters, and you know, and being a lighter and brighter that you are, you know, that puts you in a beautiful position of being able to share and empower other lighter and brighters to really dig deep into their empathy and learn from whatever it is that they've experienced, to magnify those experiences and hopefully come out of it with more empathy. And, you know, being in the South, being from DC, being in the position that you are of influence around and I'm surprised you only have 2,000 friends. Let's be real. You're kind of a rock star.
I was a late bloomer on Facebook, but
but you know, having that kind of that knowledge and influence that you do have is a blessing, you know. And I truly believe, and I have Brené Brown to back me up, is that, you know, the strength in your vulnerability is what is going to get you through and get us all through. And we just need to allow ourselves to lean back on that, I think.
Well, this is one of the ironic things that this whole pandemic has taught us, because people are legitimately suffering as far as, you know, their ability to make a living and that kind of thing, is it's kind of okay to be real right now. You know,
1,000%.
10 years ago, maybe not, you know, but now we're in this weird time in our culture where, you know, as the saying goes, everyone is hurting to one degree or another, and it's kind of okay to be real, and part of that is being soft. I think it's this is part of why I call this pandemic the opportunity of a lifetime, not just for the American culture, but the world at large. I mean, we all have we're in this weird swirl where time is slowed down, and we suddenly have a moment to step back and take stock and look within ourselves and get spiritual, whatever it is that we all do, to just take it in, much less then decide what we're going to do about it. But that gets back to my whole thing about, are we going to be part of the problem or part of the solution? And to me, asking that question of ourselves gives us power, because we have choices. Even if our job is shut down right now, or we've been laid off, or, you know, we can't go to the gym to work out, or whatever the case is, we have so much power in terms of what we think, because our thoughts are ours. We own those.
Right.
And then what we do. And, you know, one of the things I think that's fortunate about musicians is this ability to speak for many who can't speak, and communicate with many who are willing to hear, and all this kind of thing. But one thing I've noticed has helped a lot for musicians right now who are struggling for ways to make income, giving the tools that they're okay to use now, like the internet for live concerts and stuff, is those who make it about somebody else are the ones who have the most intriguing story. Here's a good example. My friend and client, Muriel Anderson, this coming Friday is doing a performance with some really cool video screens and stuff behind her. But 50% of the proceeds to anyone who donates to her Patreon page or whatever the case may be during the show goes to saving of a live venue that has no shows right now. Now that is brilliant. So she is still performing for her audience. She's doing what she does really well, but she's making it about someone else at the same time. So every single one of us as a creative has the ability to go, who's hurting right now? Who can I help? How can I help them? And then marry that with things like online concerts and other things we do. That's a story people want to hear. They want to be a part of it. It's not just supporting, Emma G and her music. It's supporting Emma G and what she's supporting by supporting her music. And not a lot of people are in the position we are to do that. So, Muriel's just one example, but I just thought that was absolutely freaking brilliant that she came up with that. Everybody wins. The audience gets great music because Lord knows she's really good. She gets some income from doing what she does because she can't tour right now. And the venue gets money to keep their doors open. What's not to like about that?
No, absolutely. The musicians of the Capital Groove Collective and myself, we managed to raise over $300 for the Black Lives Matter movement here in DC recently. There's nothing better. I totally 1000% agree. And so you said that she's performing this Friday?
This coming Friday.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah, and it's I'm trying to remember if you go to Muriel's page, Muriel Anderson, or murielanderson.com/now. It's about all of her current events and stuff she's doing, and that show will be in there under the Now page, NOW.
Cool. And she's working with Azalea Music and yourself at the moment?
She has over the years. I've had Muriel in here a bunch of different times for various things.
That's awesome.
She was on some of Tommy Emmanuel's projects. She recorded one of her own projects here, a really, really cool double CD with this amazing digital cover she designed, and all sorts of other folks that she knew were on that project too. And so she's been in and out here a few times over the years.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We are coming. I can't believe how quickly this hour has passed. I can't believe it. You're amazing.
Nobody can ever shut me up.
No, I love it. It's great. I think it's a nice refreshing thing for me, because I'm usually the one who's always like meh, 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 meh. Not that you're like that at all. It's really wonderful to be able to learn from and hear your stories. You're full of so much inspiration, so much knowledge that I could honestly talk to you for hours. Before we go though, I've got two quick questions. The first question is, what have you learned about yourself the most during quarantine?
Well, it's a little bit of repetition, I guess, but I'm way more resilient and capable of handling things as they are with the skills I already have. I didn't realize where those skills were going to have come from, but I'm way more okay than I thought I was.
Awesome. And I guess my next one is, what is your why?
Oh, that's very simple. I believe that our purpose on this planet is to do good while we're here. It's that simple, to make a positive contribution to the planet. I have like tons of stuff I could go through that I have every day in terms of rituals and habits and all the sayings and everything else. But
I love those. Please feel free to.
the one that I live by the most is DGBK. I have a little sign next to my bed. I have one here in the studio, DGBK, and that's do good and be kind. In longer form, it's do good in the world and be kind to others. If we can strive, we may not always achieve it. Well, you know, we all have our days, but if we can strive to do good and be kind, we have met that purpose of making a positive contribution to the planet while we're here. Anytime we're not feeling that we're doing that, we need to take a serious look in the mirror.
Yeah.
That's what guides every single thing I do every day for my wife, my family, my friends, my clients, everybody. And when it's all boiled down to something super simple like that, it kind of makes it easy to do. It's not hard.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot easier than being mad and angry and accusing people and all the other stuff that we like to do. It's actually pretty damn easy.
Yeah, 1000%. No, I love it. Before we go, we have one quick comment from somebody who said, yes, we are inconvenienced and we have expectations and entitlement. That's the unfortunate part of the US. To be clear, however, people are traumatized and lack coping skills. I think you're saying similar things, but just wanted to clarify. Thanks for having the courageous conversation.
Yeah, I appreciate that comment because, you know, I keep having to remind myself that, you know, this is a really, really serious time we're going through. And, you know, I would rather people err on the side of thinking it's a little worse than it really is than thinking it's not worse than it is.
Right.
Meaning pretending like nothing's going on and not doing what's necessary as a human being to get us to the other side faster. So yeah, it's serious shit. I mean, like I said, we've never ever been through this before. We're all kind of navigating our own way through it. And if we, you know, if we reach out to each other and have some empathy, as we talked at length about, we'll do all right.
Yeah.
We'll be fine.
We will. Thank you so much for being here you know, on this talk. Thank you to everybody who's tuned in tonight. Of course, if you do have any questions or comments or want to get in touch directly with Fett, aka Fett Nashville, please head over to azaleamusic.com. That is AZALEA music.com. Or of course, Women in Audio.
Empowering Women in Audio.
Empowering Women in Audio, sorry.
.com.
.com, there we go. Thank you again. To everybody else, be good, be kind, spread love like it's going out of fashion.
Amen.
Don't forget, please, that part of that kindness is not forgetting to call your mum.
Amen.
You can't control me now.